Have you ever wondered where the items you carry or where come from? Well, what if I tell you the clothes you're wearing right now have traveled the world to get to you? Turns out, these clothes, or on a broader scale, almost all items, are manufactured and transported throughout the world.
The global economy is in the middle of a transformation that most people barely notice. Nations that once dominated trade and finance are no longer unchallenged. Emerging powers are rewriting the rules, creating new alliances, and changing how money flows across continents. If you think the world economy is stable, think again. Economic power is shifting, and these changes are reshaping global markets in ways that will affect everything from jobs to investments, and even the cost of living. Today, we're diving deep into this dramatic transformation to uncover how the rules of global wealth are being rewritten. The first major shift comes from the rise of Asia, particularly China and India. For decades, Western economies like the United States and European powers dominated global trade, finance, and manufacturing. But now, Asia is taking center stage. China has become the world's largest manufacturing hub, producing everything from electronics to textiles on an unprecedented scale. India is rapidly becoming a technology and service powerhouse. These nations are not just producing goods, they're creating influence. Their decisions about trade, tariffs, and investment ripple through global markets, often challenging the dominance of traditional powers. This shift is redefining supply chains, changing investment strategies, and forcing global companies to rethink where they produce, sell, and invest. Next, we see the growing influence of digital economies. Technology giants, cryptocurrency markets, and online financial platforms are creating wealth in ways traditional industries cannot match. Companies that dominate the digital space wield enormous economic power, often surpassing the GDP of entire nations. This is creating a new kind of market where physical resources matter less than data, innovation, and connectivity. Global trade is no longer just about raw materials or finished products, it's about digital influence, intellectual property, and technological supremacy. The companies that control these assets are reshaping global markets in real time, often faster than governments can regulate. Energy markets are also central to these economic shifts. The global transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy is not just an environmental issue, it's a redistribution of economic power. Nations rich in oil and gas once held immense leverage over global markets. Now, countries investing in solar, wind, and battery technologies are gaining influence, potentially surpassing traditional energy superpowers. This shift impacts trade, investment, and geopolitics. Nations that adapt quickly to clean energy technologies are positioning themselves for long-term dominance, while those that cling to old energy models risk falling behind economically. Currency dynamics are another key factor. The U.S. dollar has long been the world's reserve currency, giving the United States immense financial leverage. But as economic power shifts, other currencies like the Chinese yuan are gaining global acceptance. Digital currencies and central bank-backed cryptocurrencies are also emerging as new tools for cross-border transactions. These developments could reduce the dominance of traditional financial systems, alter global trade patterns, and give emerging economies more influence in shaping international markets. Understanding these shifts is crucial for investors, businesses, and governments alike. Trade alliances and regional economic blocs are also reshaping markets. Organizations like the European Union, ASEAN, and the African Continental Free Trade Area are creating integrated markets that rival traditional global powers. These alliances allow member nations to negotiate collectively, leverage economies of scale, and attract investment that might otherwise go elsewhere. As a result, multinational corporations must navigate increasingly complex trade landscapes, balancing relationships with multiple regional powers instead of relying solely on Western markets. This fragmentation of influence is changing the way global supply chains, tariffs, and investments operate. Global debt patterns are quietly influencing economic power as well. Many countries are borrowing heavily to fund infrastructure, social programs, and economic stimulus. While borrowing can fuel growth, it also creates vulnerabilities. Nations with high debt exposure may find their policy decisions constrained by creditors, whether other countries, banks, or international institutions. Conversely, countries with strong financial reserves can exert influence over indebted nations, shaping trade, policy, and investment decisions. This dynamic is adding a new layer of complexity to global markets, where financial leverage often matters more than sheer production capacity. Another subtle but critical factor is the shift in demographics. Populations in developed countries are aging, reducing labor force growth and creating fiscal pressures. Meanwhile, emerging economies are experiencing youth booms, providing both labor and consumer markets. These demographic changes affect everything from manufacturing and real estate to consumer spending and government policy. Companies and investors are paying close attention because demographic advantages can translate into long-term economic dominance. Markets are increasingly shaped by population trends as much as financial strategies or natural resources. The rise of sovereign wealth funds is also changing the game. Nations with excess capital, like those in the Middle East and Asia, are using sovereign wealth funds to invest globally, acquiring stakes in technology, infrastructure, and real estate. These funds operate strategically, often with long-term goals that go beyond immediate profits. Their influence is vast, quietly shaping industries, markets, and entire sectors. Investors in businesses now must consider not just competitors, but state-backed entities that wield both financial power and strategic vision. Geopolitical tensions play a decisive role in economic shifts. 2. Trade wars, sanctions, and territorial disputes are no longer isolated political events. They directly impact markets and wealth distribution. When countries impose tariffs or restrict access to resources, global supply chains adjust, investment flows change, and currencies fluctuate. Markets are increasingly intertwined with geopolitical strategy, making economic power a combination of financial resources, political leverage, and strategic foresight. This interconnectedness is creating a global system where no economy operates in isolation. The movement of innovation hubs is also reshaping economic influence. Silicon Valley may have led the world for decades, but new centers of technological advancement are emerging in Asia, Europe, and even Africa. These hubs attract talent, investment, and ideas, creating localized clusters of wealth and power. As innovation spreads globally, economic dominance is no longer tied to geography alone. Nations and cities that cultivate ecosystems of creativity and entrepreneurship are becoming powerful players in global markets, often rivaling traditional industrial powers. Supply chain resilience is now a strategic economic factor. The disruptions caused by pandemics, climate events, and geopolitical conflicts have exposed vulnerabilities in global markets. Companies and countries are reevaluating where they source materials, produce goods, and manage logistics. Economic power increasingly depends on the ability to maintain stable supply chains, adapt to disruption, and leverage regional advantages. Those who can do this effectively gain both market share and influence, while those who cannot face economic setbacks and reduce competitiveness. Corporate consolidation is another driver of economic power shifts. Multinational corporations are merging, acquiring competitors, and expanding influence across borders. This concentration of corporate power affects global trade, pricing, and innovation. As corporations grow larger and more interconnected, they increasingly resemble nation-states in terms of influence. Investors, governments, and consumers are forced to navigate this new reality, where a few companies hold disproportionate sway over entire markets. Finally, climate change and environmental policy are shaping the economic landscape. Nations that invest in green technologies, carbon markets, and sustainable practices are positioning themselves to dominate future global trade. Conversely, countries that resist adaptation risk losing market access, facing sanctions, or suffering economic consequences from environmental disasters. Economic power is now closely tied to sustainability, making environmental strategy not just a moral imperative but a financial and geopolitical one. All of these factors together create a world where economic power is no longer static, it is fluid, shifting based on innovation, demographics, geopolitics, resources, and strategic investment. Global markets are being reshaped, not by one single factor, but by the interplay of many forces, each influencing the other. The nations, companies, and investors that recognize these shifts and adapt quickly will prosper. Those who ignore them risk falling behind. So, what does this mean for you as a consumer, investor, or business leader? Awareness is the key. Understanding how these power shifts operate can help you make smarter decisions about investments, career moves, and strategic partnerships. The global economy is no longer predictable or uniform. It's a constantly changing ecosystem where influence, wealth, and opportunity move in unexpected ways. Those who understand the forces at play can leverage them for growth, security, and long-term advantage. Economic power is no longer concentrated in familiar centers or static hierarchies. It flows, adapts, and evolves. The markets are reshaped every day, quietly and dramatically, by forces most people never see. But now, the shifts are real, the consequences profound, and the opportunities immense. The question is, will you recognize them and act, or will you be left behind in a world that is moving faster than ever before?